ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our third annual joint meeting with Asalh'S. I am the president of the Pittsburgh chapter of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, affectionately known as Aahgs. We have been in existence since 1991 and have presented a variety of programs over the years that have helped our members to better understand how to conduct their family research. Our partnership with Asalh'S has further enhanced our meetings and given us an opportunity to share information and ideas. If at any time you would like to ask a question or make a comment, we encourage you to use the chat and Q&A features, and we will address your questions later in the program. At this time, I would like to introduce the president of the Dr. Edna B. Mckenzie branch of Asalh'S. Ronald Saunders, a chartered member of the Dr. Edna B. Mckenzie branch of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, Asalh'S, is now serving his second term as president of the Mckenzie branch. In 2016, Ronald coordinated a Mckenzie branch program entitled African American Trailblazers in Pittsburgh History, which was commended and recognized at the 2017 Asalh'S Annual Conference held in Cincinnati, Ohio. Ronald is a longtime civil and human rights advocate and activist in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area and nationally. He is a prolific writer and poet, and is the author of an article in the 2020 fall edition of Soul Pit magazine entitled From the Files of a Human Relations Representative to A Brief Historical Snapshot of Housing Discrimination. Ronald is an active contributing member of the CEIR, which is the Corporate Equity and Inclusion Roundtable. He is presently the chairperson of the Nathaniel L. Project and is presently spearheading an effort to have an advisory council to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission in Penn Hills, Pennsylvania. Ladies and gentlemen, Ronald Brooks Saunders.
Thank you, Marlene. It is a distinct honor and privilege to welcome our esteemed National Asalh'S President, Dr. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, our Mckenzie branch members, Asalh'S Executive Council, Asalh'S branch members, Aahgs members, families and friends of Asalh'S and Aahgs. The Dr. Edna B. Mckenzie branch of Asalh'S was named after Dr. Edna B. Mckenzie, who was the first African-American woman to obtain a PhD in history from the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Edna B. Mckenzie was a moving force on the Asalh'S Executive Council for many years, and she was instrumental in bringing Asalh'S, the annual conference, to Pittsburgh in 2004. The Mckenzie branch was chartered in 2012 at the Asalh'S National Convention, which was held in Pittsburgh, PA. The Mckenzie branch is involved in a multitude of diverse programs centered around the mission of Asalh'S. I first met Dr. Mckenzie in my youth when she and my mother were employed at the newspaper Record, the Pittsburgh Courier. The mission of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History is to promote research, preserve, interpret, and disseminate information about Black life, history, and culture to the global community. I am fully appreciative of the ongoing collaboration between the Pittsburgh chapter of Aahgs and the Mckenzie branch. Our collaboration has proven to be educational, informative, stimulating, and inspiring in our mutual endeavors of learning of our cultural, genealogy, historical heritage. Marlene has been fully supportive of the Mckenzie branch programs. Marlene traveled to Cumberland, Maryland, twice with the Mckenzie branch on the Negro Mountain Project and provided the impetus for the name change for Negro Mountain to read Negro Mountain, African American Historic Site. Now let me introduce Kendra Ross, who is Assistant Professor of Sports, Arts, and Entertainment Management at Point Park University, who will sing Asalh'S adopted national song, which is the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Kendra Ross is an activist in cultural work in Pittsburgh. Kendra has been involved in a multitude of activities, music industry veteran. She spent 17 years at Universal Music Group, where she most recently served as Director of Label Process Operation. She is also an accomplished songwriter, independent recording artist, seasoned sectional vocalist, and music producer. She has recorded with internationally acclaimed artists such as Quincy Jones, Lauryn Hill, and Kanye West. Kendra has performed at renowned venues, including Blue Note, Jazz Club in New York, B.B. King's Blues, LA and New York City, Arena Theater Houston as a headliner and opener for soul and R&B stars like Kenneth Babyface Edmonds, Lala Hathaway, and the late Isaac Hayes. I give you Kendra Ross.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Thank you, Kendra.
Hello, I'd like to introduce Ms. Reverend B. Denise Welch. Ms. Reverend Welch is a senior pastor at Bidwell Street United Presbyterian Church, where she served for 13 years. She holds an associate's degree in business administration from Robert Morris University, a bachelor in science in community ministry from Geneva College, a master in divinity from the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, and a PhD in healthcare ethics from Duquesne University. She has preached, taught, and sung in churches all around Western Pennsylvania areas and in various cities around the country. She has served as president of PEN, the Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network, a faith-based community organization system out of the Gamaliel Network. She has also served as a chair of Nagasaki, the Women's Leadership Training Development Arm, also of the Gamaliel Network, serving over 500 women in 17 states.
Good afternoon. Let us pray together. Our Father and our God, we pause to celebrate this day, the memory of your servant, Carter G. Woodson. We appreciate his accomplishments on behalf of your people, and we thank you for sending a man of his humility and stature to achieve for us the plans you established from the foundation of the world. We acknowledge your love in his work, and we declare our gratitude for his willing acceptance of your call. Thank you for using him to highlight the best and the brightest among us, known and unknown, infamous and ordinary, because our founders' commitment and bravery, our gifts to this country, are made known. This is the kind of God you are, the one who brings light to shadows and who illuminates a path forward through the ones you call to service. May we all have such courage and commitment, being the examples needed for our children to follow. We ask all of this and even more in your holy name, we do pray. Amen.
Good afternoon. It is my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham. My name is Alexis Clipper. I serve as secretary for the Edna B. Mckenzie branch of Asalh'S. And Dr. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham is our national president for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. An award-winning scholar and teacher, she is the Victor S. Thomas Professor of History and of African and African American Studies at Harvard University. Chair of the Department of History from 2018 to 2020, she is the first African American to lead this department, from which Carter G. Woodson received his doctorate in 1912. She is also the former chair of Harvard's Department of African and African American Studies. Her two most important writings published in 2020 include the article, History in the Face of Slavery, A Family Portrait, and the 10th edition of From Slavery to Freedom, the Classic Survey, first published by John Hope Franklin in 1947. Dr. Higginbotham is the recipient of numerous awards and honors for her historical writings. Most notably, she received the National Humanities Medal from President Barack Obama at the White House in September 2015 for illuminating the African American journey. She is also the recipient of the James W.C. Pennington Award from the University of Heidelberg in Germany for her work in African American religious history. She was also given the John Hope Franklin Award, sponsored by Diverse Magazine and the TIAA Institute in 2019, while Brown University Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity in America held a 2-day conference on her scholarly contributions that same year. In January 2021, she will be the honoree of the Winter Family Benefit, sponsored by American Ancestors and the New England Historic Genealogical Society. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Alexis. It is truly an honor for me to speak to you today on the birthday of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. I want to thank Ronald Saunders, the president of the Edna Mckenzie branch, for inviting me. And I also want to thank Marlene Bransom and Tammy Saunders for their work in the logistical contribution to this virtual event. Your branch president, Ronald Saunders, suggested that it would be nice for me to talk about my family's relationship with Carter G. Woodson, especially since Asalh'S 2021 theme focuses on the Black family. And for those who may be watching and don't know, Asalh'S is the founder of Black History Month. And every February 1st, we introduce a theme that is recognized throughout the nation and even in places outside the United States. The theme for 2021 is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. And so I am especially happy that with that theme, this event is being co-sponsored by Aahgs, the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. And when Ron mentioned something about a contest between Asalh'S and Aahgs, the Woodson Trivia Challenge, I think you call it, Asalh'S versus Aahgs, the rematch, I absolutely knew that the family context was the relevant and appropriate topic, because what you have here is sibling rivalry. So today I want to talk to you, though, on a topic that I'm calling as an heirloom passed down in my family, the gift of Carter G. Woodson. You know, often when we think of family and family ties, the ties that bind us as a family or an extended family, we think of blood ties. But sometimes we think of people who are not related to us by blood, but they are family all the same. We also think of tangible items, material objects, objects that remind us of kinship, objects that are passed down through the generations, from mother to daughter, from father to son, from an older relative to a younger one. We call those objects heirlooms. And they don't have to be items of high monetary value, but they are highly valuable to us. When the heirloom is handed down, the receiver recognizes it to be a cherished family gift. It could be simply the photograph of a foreparent. I have a colleague at Harvard, the historian Taya Miles, who has researched a cloth sack that an enslaved mother gave to her daughter when the daughter was being sold away from her. The sack was filled with a few items, pecans to eat, a lock of her mother's hair, and other items for the daughter to remember her mother by. The sack had embroidered on it a message of love from the mother to the daughter, whose name was Ashley. And while the contents of the sack were long gone over time, that humble sack was passed from generation to generation well into the 20th century. It's now on display at the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. So now everyone can see it. The great value of an heirloom then is the story that goes with it and the feeling inspired by it. And this is why an individual who has been given an heirloom will say, this belonged to my mother. This belonged to my father. This belonged to my grandfather, and really means so much more than those words stated in that sentence or in those sentences. For in the simple sentence, this belonged to my father, is the reality that the object itself holds the story of our family's past, its heritage. Whether that story is known in great detail or hardly known at all, the heirloom as a tangible object holds within itself the connection between one's own individual story and those who went before. The heirloom is an object from the past brought into the present, a gift that can be seen and touched. And although it holds the story of someone who preceded us, it inspires us. It inspires the receiver of that gift with a feeling of connection. And it gives to the receiver a sense of place within a continuum of kinship that defies death and the limits of time. For me, Carter G. Woodson provided such a gift, such an heirloom that was passed down to me by my father, and also a gift that was passed directly to me. Now you may be asking yourself, well, how can this be, Professor? Because you just said that an heirloom is tangible, that in its very form as an object, it holds a story about one's family. Well, this was indeed true for me in two ways. So here's the story about the first way. My father, Albert N.D. Brooks, worked with Carter Woodson from the 1930s until Woodson's death in 1950. After Woodson died, my father served Asalh'S as its secretary treasurer. He managed the office headquarters in DC. and edited the Negro History Bulletin until his own death in 1964. Throughout my formative years, my elementary school and high school years, I would go on most Saturdays with my father to the Asalh'S office at 1538 9th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C. And during Woodson's lifetime, I always marvel at that, because during Woodson's lifetime, that same building functioned simultaneously as his home, his living quarters, as the Asalh'S office, and as the location of his publishing enterprise, the Associated Publishers. Woodson's personal living space, the space where he actually did all the private things in his life, he limited to the 3rd floor. The rest of the house was filled with books and papers and staff and all sorts of objects that service the cause for producing and disseminating African-American history. And this is where my father spent a great deal of his time after Woodson died. Because after Woodson died, the house no longer was a home, but it was the Asalh'S headquarters. And when my father would take me to the office, I watched, and I often helped in my small, youthful way, my father and 2 staff persons, women who were formerly assistants to Dr. Woodson. Their names are Willie Miles and Narissa Milton. I shall never forget them. And in the Asalh'S office, I met and came to know famous scholars whom Woodson had mentored: Rayford Logan, Charles H. Wesley, Benjamin Quarles, and John Hope Franklin. To me, they were far more than famous names on book covers or attached to the titles of articles. These men were real. I saw how seriously they took their work as they met with my father in the Asalh'S office and even at times in my home. And I could see that even though I didn't comprehend much of what they were saying, I could sense that they were kindred spirits, united in a mission for the advancement of our people. Eventually, I came to realize what the heirloom was. The heirloom was the house. He had gifted this real, concrete, tangible edifice to Asalh'S. He had gifted what was his home and his place of work to a new generation in the hope that they would continue to carry out the mission he started. That house represented a storehouse of documents about the history of our people. The house represented also an arsenal of knowledge to be used as weaponry, to be used as weapons in the fight against racism and social injustice. Woodson's death in 1950 did not permit him to see the significant social and legal strides that would occur in America, brought on by the movement for civil rights and Black pride, but Woodson had surely helped to lay the foundation for our progress. In my youth, all this felt very personal, very familial, because I accompanied my father, as I said, to the house, but also to branch events and listened to him give speeches in programs just like I am doing today. I went with him to the opening of a school named for Carter G. Woodson. In the office, in that Asalh'S office though, I would peruse the pages of the Negro History Bulletin, reading the articles and looking at the photographs, looking at their covers and looking at the pages inside. I watched my father lay out the press copy on tables in our basement, in our home, before he took them to the office. And for me, looking on with a child's and teenage eye, Woodson's house was a special place. It was there that everyone, in one way or another, spoke of continuing Carter G. Woodson's legacy. And I was certainly conscious of how hard my father worked, because this wasn't his paying job. My father's paying job was as a junior high school principal. And earlier when he worked with Woodson as a high school teacher. And yet it was Woodson who gave this headquarters to our organization and gave us the mission to connect with his work and to keep it going. And my father did just that. And he knew the nuts and the bolts of the office at the very level of keeping lights on and paying bills. In the 1950s and 1960s, he was the manager of the office. He knew perhaps more than anyone else that his generation of historians, this later generation to follow, had inherited not only an organization, but a house, a tangible site from which to work. For my father, this required the commitment to making Asalh'S financially strong and with revenue to bring out African-American history to students in the form of books and the journal and the bulletin and Black History Kits and Negro History Week celebrations. Because my father worked in the public schools, and it was important to him that I and others my age got the story that Woodson had given to us. And for me, my father never let me forget this. He used to love to say, we work to disprove the lie that the Negro has no history or none worthy of respect. This is the statement my father has passed down to me, and I often say it. My father died in March, at the end of March, 1964, March 30th, in fact. And the Negro History Bulletin was devoted to his memory. And in that bulletin, Asalh'S president, he was then the president in 1964, Charles Wesley praised my father for his service to the association. And this is what he said. He said, it was Brooks who thought out and worked the plan to finance the continuance of the association in the days of adversity in the early 50s, and finally saw it come out of debt with headquarters, and stocks clear of all obligations while facing a future of meaningful service. And I take great pride in that same legacy. And today, the Woodson home is owned by the National Park Service. It's listed as a National Historic Site. Its magnificent renovation is steadily moving along, and in 2 years, that renovation will be completed. And equally important, Woodson's home is part of a larger structure that will once again house Asalh'S. It's also a museum for all to see. Now, I stated, though, that there were two ways that the gift of Carter G. Woodson was like an heirloom to me. And the second way came, I think, as a gift directly to me from Woodson. It was Woodson who gave me the first comprehensive history of my family. And it was a history different from the way my father shared stories, and my father did. And I don't want to understate the importance of my father in sharing stories about his parents and grandparents who had been slaves in Richmond, Virginia, and then afterwards, freedom, at least my grandfather and when others too, in Richmond, but my grandfather who moved to Washington, DC. He would show us the family Bible, which obviously was an heirloom, photographs. And those things, those objects represented not merely stories of individuals on my ancestral tree. The way my father told the story, it was much more about me and much more than just about me or just about my family. It was a story about my people and my people's history. And so I appreciated very much what my family gave to me. But Dr. Woodson gave me something differently, because I think, like most families, we hear these stories in bits and pieces. Dr. Woodson gave me an heirloom, and I'll describe it in this story. It was a gift that came when I was in junior high school. when I discovered my grandfather's book of poetry. Now, I always knew my grandfather was a Baptist minister in DC, but I didn't realize that he was a poet until I discovered on our family's bookshelf a book titled The Pastor's Voice by Walter Henderson Brooks. The book was published by Woodson's Associated Publishers in the early 1940s. And only later would I realize the importance of the Associated Publishers in making the writings of African Americans, people like my grandfather, their writings possible, because they didn't have those opportunities for publishing the way we have today. And it was Woodson's publishers, the Associated Publishers, that put out so many books, including The Miseducation of the Negro, the famous book by Carter Woodson himself. But my discovery of my grandfather's book left a lasting impact on me when I read the introduction. The introduction of the book was written by Carter G. Woodson. And Woodson presented in those pages a far more comprehensive, far more composite story of my kinfolk than any stories I had ever heard before. Woodson gave me a new and clearer appreciation, a sense of consciousness of being part of a network that crossed generations. And in this heirloom of a book, Woodson had introduced me to earlier generations of family members whose names and experiences I had never known before. He even introduced me to the consciousness of the repetition of names in my family, names like Albert and Alberta and Walter and Warren and Lucy and Julia and even Evelyn. I tried to position myself within the generational stories. And over the years, I searched for physical and psychological. I searched for vocational and other forms of likeness in kinfolk of an earlier era. And once again, it was Carter G. Woodson who provided the answer to my search. In Woodson's journal, the Journal of Negro History in 1922, much later, I discovered, well, much later than 1922, but also much later than my childhood. I was probably in undergraduate or graduate school when I discovered two articles written in 1922 by my grandfather, scholarly articles on the history of Black Baptists. I felt instantly that because of Woodson, I had been introduced to my grandfather's writings in a way that linked me to him in a very emotional way for me. Because when I wrote my book, Righteous Discontent, the women's movement in the Black Baptist Church, I knew that Dr. Woodson had given me directly a unique and lasting link between my grandfather and me. And so I want to conclude just by saying, although Woodson never married and never had children, all of us are surely his descendants. So to all of us, the father of Black history has left a legacy to pass on to future generations. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Higginbotham. Yes, we would like to go ahead and now take questions from the audience. Please go ahead and put your questions into, oh, I see a raised hand, pardon me. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Samsung SM.
I think that's me. I'm Regina Vaughn, President of Philadelphia Heritage.
How are you, Regina?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. I'm glad I tuned in. Did not hear this part of the story and of your history. So I'm going to know, will the recording be available? Will you give the branch permission to record, make the speech available?
Of course, I give permission, certainly.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. And I learned a lot of the personal side. And just on a personal note, I was just cleaning up and picked up that book where you assigned it to my mother.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, Regina's mother was a longtime Asalh'S member, Othello Vaughn. She was one of my mentors and one of my heroes. And she is another person who has left heirlooms in many ways to all of us.
And now that you say that, because you know genealogy is my passion, please take a moment to say to the audience how important it is to make sure you leave in your will what you want done with those things, because you don't want them to be lost. Like, for example, I'll be donating those things like Mom's books to the Bloxon collection here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that is very important. I think my whole talk today was really about, in the context of family, as we leave heirlooms that we have been left, this by Carter G. Woodson, these documents, these papers, so we can go to the Library of Congress and see the Woodson papers. We ourselves are writing and leaving these real tangible items as documents, as guides, as a connection between ourselves and the present. And when heirlooms are given to us, they're given to us because the gifter, the one who does the giving, believes that we are the one to cherish the gift. And we are the one to pass that gift on. And so the importance of archives, in fact, I think on Asalh'S TV, in fact, I know, on Asalh'S TV, we have a session with Lopez Matthews and people who are talking about the importance of archives. So I would invite you to look at Asalh'S TV. We also always talk about this at our conferences. And so this is an important message, a legacy from Woodson that has gone on. I saw in the chat that someone asked me about where could they find the pastor's voice. The pastor's voice is not available anymore. The Associated Publishers is not, in existence anymore. The pastor's voice is at the Library of Congress. You can't find it on Amazon, unfortunately. I have a copy in my home, but if you went to the Library of Congress, you could see it. Other questions?
Yes, Dr. Brooks Higginbotham. One question is, how important is it for you to have both led the department at Harvard and president of Asalh'S?
Right, well, I will put it in three different contexts, I guess. For me, to become president of Asalh'S is a great honor, but it's also, I never forget that this is the legacy of Woodson and this is the legacy of my father. And my sister often says to me, I don't want to cry, Daddy would be so proud of you. I get emotional when I say this. So, being president of Asalh'S, my father would be so proud of me. Now, being head of African American Studies was very important to me at Harvard because I recognized that had it not been for Carter G. Woodson and the movement he started, we wouldn't have had an African American Studies at Harvard University. In fact, I wouldn't be teaching African American history at Harvard University. So that's very important. It was also important to me because I followed Henry Louis Gates Jr., who was the, he certainly wasn't the first head of African American Studies. The first head of it was a man named Ewart Guinier in the 1960s. But it had kind of really become a shadow of itself. And so when Henry Louis Gates came in 1990, he really restored African American studies at Harvard to a great enterprise, even leading us to have a graduate program. And so after he stepped down from the chairship of that department, I became the chair. And I led it for several years, and I augmented the faculty. I brought far more women into the faculty. And so I was honored to play that role. And also I played a role, I brought a new initiative while I was the chair of what we called social engagement, where I had the students do scholarly work, but connect that scholarly work to a useful project in the community. And then finally, why was it important to be chair of the history department? Well, I always tell people this. I am important, not because I'm the first Black chair of the history department. I am important because this is the department that gave W.E.B. Du Bois his degree in 1895, that gave Carter G. Woodson his degree in 1912, that gave the PhD degree to not only those two great pioneers, but to Charles H. Wesley and to Rayford W. Logan and to John Hope Franklin and to Nell Painter, a very vibrant woman historian still today, and to many people. So yes, that's how I think about those three offices.
Dr. Brooks Higginbotham, we have another question from Sylvia Cyrus. Would you please provide an update on the status of the Woodson House historic site?
Yes, my great pleasure. So the Woodson Historic Site is has been, in the works for a very long time. And then under President Obama, there was really an effort to get the Congress to make this a priority, and also through the lobbying of the representative from the District of Columbia, Eleanor Holmes Norton. And so the Woodson Committee of Asalh'S is responsible for being the liaison between the National Park Service and the Congress. And so we are responsible for helping the National Park Service with its interpretive plans. And that's important because while the Park Service has done a great job in terms of the physical renovation, and also a very good job with the interpretive plan, I must say that we played a crucial role in that interpretive planning. And so when you visit the Woodson home today, and you can visit it, you will be given a tour of the home. But the home is not just simply 1538 Woodside, 9th Street now. The home is a three-part. It's 1538, which is clearly Woodson's home, and it's the way it looked exactly when Woodson lived. The office on the first two floors, his bedroom on the top floor. But it's also connected to two other buildings, 1540, 1542. And those two other buildings create an open space, which is like a museum, where people also walk through it. And on that top floor is Asalh'S. We have an office there. So does the National Park Service. At 4 o'clock today, if you go to Asalh'S TV, if you go on our website, and I think, Ron, you have the flyer for that, you will see on Asalh'S TV the event that the Park Service has every year for Carter G. Woodson's birthday. And there will even be a reenactor, a person who acts the part of Woodson. And he's really good because he captures Woodson's voice. If you've ever heard Woodson's voice, and I have heard his voice, he captures his voice. Yes. Now I see Ron is asking me about my great-grandfather. Yes. So my great-grandfather, I didn't want to make this completely my family's history, but my great-grandfather, who really my father introduced to me through the study of history, and through a photograph that was made of the jury to try Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. That trial never took place. Jefferson Davis was pardoned in a general amnesty by the president of the time, but my grandfather was on the jury. He was selected for the jury to try Jefferson Davis, and that photograph is in From Slavery to Freedom. It's in the bulletin. It's been in a lot of places. And his name was Albert. My father was named after him. His name was Albert Royal Brooks. He was born a slave. It's a really interesting story that I have written about in an article about photographs in my family, because we have photographs of all these people. And the article is called History in the Face of Slavery. It appears in a book called To Make Their Way in the World, To Make Their Way in the World. And that book is out by Aperture Publishers.
Thank you for sharing. I believe we have a live question in the audience from Gladys Nesbitt. You can unmute yourself, Gladys. Okay, we can come back to you, Gladys. Dr. Brooks Higginbotham, we have a couple questions here in the chat. Did you at first face resistance regarding the subject of African American history from any of the other faculty and or administration?
No, okay, so when I was in high school, and I was in high school in the 60s, the movement was in full force. And so there was quite a large demand for African American history. And then when I went to college, which was also in the 60s, the movement had begun to be so strong, and there were so many things being published that scholars like John Hope Franklin even talked about the new Negro history. And he had an article called The New Negro History that appeared in the Journal of Negro History. But when John Hope Franklin spoke of the new Negro history, he always gave credit to Carter G. Woodson as the founder of that history. And what he was saying was that history was also important, played a very important role in the struggle for civil rights. In fact, John Lewis, when he gave his talk at the founding or the unveiling, how do you call it, of the National Museum in DC, when he gave his talk, he said, I first learned about Negro history from Carter G. Woodson's Negro History Week. Which by the way, leads me to another point, and that is about our Black History Festival, which we will be holding throughout the month of February. It's going to be a great festival, so please, everybody, join us in that festival. Support us, because it's going to be great. But again, the resistance, I'm sure, existed in some places. And in fact, your question could be asked in certain areas today, because there's certain places in America today that still resist the idea of teaching Black history in schools. But I will say that that is not the norm. And in fact, how we know the major impact of this movement that we are a part of over all these decades is because Black history isn't simply taught in schools anymore. Black history is taught in museums. It's taught in museums. It's taught in television documentary. It's everywhere. And so while yes, there is resistance from the intelligent portion of our community and from most places, Black history is understood to be real, and it is understood that we as a people have made a contribution to the history of this nation. In fact, this nation would not be this nation if it weren't for the contributions and achievements of Black people.
Thank you. Dr. Brooks Higginbotham, I think this may be our last question. Is Judge Higginbotham a member of your family?
I should say, he was my husband. I was married to him. He was my husband. That's where the Higginbotham comes from. Leon was a wonderful man and a man who believed in justice. But I'll tell you an Asalh'S story. Leon loved Asalh'S. He was a member of Asalh'S. And at one point, when he was a judge, he had a case. He had a case that came before him about the desegregation of a union in Philadelphia. And this union didn't want Black people in it, and they didn't want Black people as workers because the jobs that the Black people wanted, it was something to do with truck driving. And so Leon had taken the position that the truck drivers, these same men had fought in the Vietnam War and they were truck drivers there. And now this new hurdle of putting a certain degree on them, academic degree to drive a truck was just, ludicrous. Well, in the meantime, my late husband had given a speech at Asalh'S, because this was all happening during the bicentennial of the United States. And so my late husband was in, I want to say DC, it was in DC, where he gave this speech on the, it was either DC or Philadelphia, I can't remember, but he gave this speech on the founding fathers and on the problem of slavery in regard to the founding fathers who talked all this talk of freedom and liberty and yet held other people in bondage. Well, after he came back, the lawyers for this racist union said, well, Leon should recuse himself. Leon should say, I can't judge this case because I'm prejudiced. And so Leon wrote this article, Why I Won't Recuse Myself, and he did not recuse himself. And he said, as long as Catholics can rule on Catholic cases and Jews can rule on Jewish cases, I can rule on Black cases. And the great thing about it is that Leon's first speech about the founding fathers appeared in the Journal of Negro History, our journal, as it was called then. And then following it was his famous speech, his famous writing, Why I Won't Recuse Myself, which also appeared in the Journal of Negro History. I just want to say about Leon, because he was such a wonderful man. But I also want to say that there is so much I did when I taught at a course, two courses a year at the Duke Law School in 2010-11. I talked about the role of the law in African-American history. And one of the great sources that you can find is the role of lawyers who were members of Asalh'S, people like my husband, but also, and I'm gonna give a shout out to Regina, but also Raymond Pace Alexander. Raymond Pace Alexander preceded my husband on the court. In fact, he introduced Leon when Leon gave that speech in the 1970s, and Raymond Pace Alexander died soon afterward. But he wrote articles in the Journal of Negro History. And Raymond Pace Alexander, this great lawyer, is the founder of the branch that Regina is the president of, the Philadelphia Heritage Branch. And he founded that well over 90 years ago. So yes, the Higginbothams are, like the Brookses, part of Asalh'S. Thank you so much, all of you. I want to say, Aahgs, I do hope Asalh'S wins the contest.
Yes, Yes. Well, thank you very much for I learned so much. We all just learned so much. We really do appreciate your keynote address that you shared with us, your personal story, your family history. That just has been very impactful, for us this afternoon. So we do thank you, and thank you, for serving as our national president.
It is my great honor.
So now,
Alana?
Good afternoon. Woodson wanted us to understand ourselves in expansive ways, to conceive of African history as central to US history and the history of the world, a window and a way to understand and assert ourselves from a unique and fruitful vantage point. Furthermore, Woodson, like Du Bois, Bethune, and other educators and leaders of that era, believed that white folks were essentially racist because of ignorance about Black people and illusions of superiority about themselves. He believed that exposing them to a massive dose of the mind-opening evidence of history could free them from such unawareness and inanities and make us and the world safer and freer in the process.
To support in our desire to learn more about our history, we will have a Woodson Trivia Challenge between members of Asalh, Louise Walker Salters, Linda McDougall, and Reverend Charles L. Fisher III, and 3 members of Aahgs, Priscilla Collins, Charlene Fogarty Barnett, and Lorene Simmons. Alana Carter, historian of the Edna B. Mckenzie chapter and a member of Aahgs, will be the facilitator. Alternating between teams, the panelists will be given a question. If their team answers it correctly, they will be rewarded a point. If they answer it incorrectly, the other team will be allowed to answer the question. Are you ready, Team Asalh and Team Aahgs?
Yes.
Our first
Yes.
15 questions will be on Carter G. Woodson. The first question goes to Team Asalh. In what year was Carter G. Woodson born?
1875.
That is correct. So they will receive a point. Team Aahgs, where was Carter G. Woodson born?
Virginia.
You are correct with the state. Do you know the county?
Fayette County.
No, it wasn't Fayette County. But since you got the state, I'll give you that point. The place was New Canton, Buckingham County, Virginia.
Buckingham. Okay.
The next question goes to Team Asalh. What does the initial G stand for in Woodson's name?
Goodwin.
Goodwin is correct.
Oh, I'm muted. A good one.
All right. Next question goes to Team Aahgs. What were the names of Carter G. Woodson's parents?
I know. Anna and James.
Anna and James. Anna Eliza Riddle and James Henry Woodson. The point for Asalh. Alana?
The fourth of 7 children, young Woodson worked as a sharecropper and a miner to help his family. He began high school in his late teens and proved to be an excellent student, completing a 4-year course of study in less than 2 years. Although his parents could neither read nor write, Carter G. Woodson credits his father for influencing the course of his life. His father, he later wrote, insisted that learning to accept insult, to compromise on principle, to mislead your fellow man, or to betray your people is to lose your soul.
The next question goes to Asalh'. Carter G. Woodson attended at least 3 universities. Name 2 of them.
Brea College
College.
in
University of
Kentucky. And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, University of Chicago and Harvard.
Okay, this is Asalh'S. University of Chicago, Harvard, and Brea.
Brea.
Brea. You are correct. That's a point. Alana?
Woodson, who earned his PhD in history from Harvard University in 1912, becoming just the second African American to earn a PhD from the prestigious institution after Du Bois, was not simply a historian, but also a teacher who had taught in public school and knew the value and transforming power of education. Raised by parents who had been born and lived during the unrelenting radical evil of the Holocaust of enslavement, and having grown up in the midst of savage segregation himself, Woodson also valued freedom and democracy and resolutely resisted racist constraints which prevented and perverted them. He would teach freedom by freeing the mind, cultivating a life of the mind that grounded and enhanced in dignity affirming and life enhancing ways how African people understood and asserted themselves in the world. He wanted us to understand and act with the knowledge imparted by our ancient ancestors, the Egyptians. And this was that we are not just in history, we are history. And that given this every day is a donation to eternity, and even 1 hour is a contribution to the future.
Next question goes to Aahgs. Woodson began to develop a comprehensive strategy with historical education as its centerpiece to achieve several educational and social goals. Which of the following was part of Woodson's strategy? To elevate and expand Black historical knowledge and self-consciousness and teach the rich resources and reward of history, to critique and connect the falsification and misconceptions of Black history. Which of the following was part of Woodson's strategy?
Both?
You're correct. They both were. They both were.
As Ms. Marlene said, they both were, and Woodson also wanted to critique and correct white racist consciousness and self-congratulatory conceptions of history, to integrate Black history in the educational system and social lives of the people, and to use this process in the interest of remaking America and expanding the realm of freedom and democracy.
Next question goes to Asalh'S. To disseminate his message and make Black history an accessible resource for everyone, name 2 things that Woodson did.
One of them was he started Black History Week.
Correct.
And he founded the Negro History Journals, the books.
Correct. Here's the list. He trained teachers. He started history study clubs. He used the media. He taught. He lectured. He wrote letters and sent literature. He wrote extensively and published scholarly and popular books and articles. He involved community elders. He encouraged documentation and activities of remembrance and reinforcement. So Asalh'S gets that point. This next question goes to Aahgs. Also, to expand his work and encourage scholars, professionals, and laypersons to participate in his project, Woodson created several institutions and organs. Name 2 of them.
Several institutions.
Asalh'S.
What did you say?
Asalh'S.
Asalh'S is one.
Negro History Bulletin?
You're correct. The Journal of Negro History. the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and the Journal of Negro History.
Woodson formed Asalh'S for the express purpose of the collection of sociological and historical data on the Negro, the study of peoples of African blood, the publishing of books in this field, and the promotion of harmony between the races. In 1916, he edited and published the first issue of the Journal of Negro History, which he defined as a quarterly scientific magazine committed to publishing scholarly articles and documents on the history and cultures of Africa and the peoples of African descent around the world. Woodson also formed the African American owned Associated Publishers Press in 1921 and established the Negro History Bulletin in 1937 to increase readership among Black public school teachers, working class persons and youth, as well as lay persons in general. Again, his stress was on maximum outreach and engagement.
This next question goes to Asalh'S. In what year did Woodson inaugurate the celebration of Negro History Week?
1926.
You are correct.
Woodson lobbied schools and organizations to participate in a special program to encourage the study of African American history, which began in February 1926 with Negro History Week. The program was later expanded and renamed Black History Month.
This question is for Aahgs. Why did Woodson choose February for the initial week-long celebration?
Because it was the birth month of President Lincoln and Frederick Douglass.
You are correct. To honor the birth months of abolitionists Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln.
Lincoln's birthday was February 12th. Douglass, a former slave, hadn't known his actual birthday, but had marked the occasion on February 14th. One thing you may not know is that Asalh'S sets the national agenda for African American History Month. Every year, the association goes to and gets a proclamation by the President of the United States declaring the theme for African American History Month, which comes out of Washington, D.C., which comes out of Carter G. Woodson.
This next question is for Asalh'S. What was the title of Woodson's most classic work?
Miseducation of the Negro.
You are correct.
In a classic assertion in this text, he notes that if you control a person's thinking and cultivate a sense of inferiority, you will not need to tell him to go to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, he will have one cut for his special benefit. Likewise, for Woodson, the practice of freedom begins in the mind and ultimately fulfills itself in liberating and liberated action. He further states, if we do not take hold of where they left off and advance further in the service of truth and justice, we are unworthy to claim descent from such noble people. This is our challenge, and it cannot be changed or left to chance, but can be met by self-consciously taking our history in our own hands and directing it towards good and expansive ends in the interest of ourselves, humankind, and the well-being of the world. Additional books from the author include A Century of Negro Migration, published in 1918, The History of the Negro Church, published in 1921, and The Negro in Our History, published in 1922. Woodson also penned literature for elementary and secondary school students.
This question is for Aahgs. Outside of his writings, Woodson held down several positions in academia. He served as principal of the Armstrong Manual Training School in Washington, D.C., before becoming a dean at what two universities?
Howard University.
Correct? That's half right. Can anyone help her on the other one?
That was the one I knew.
About Berea.
Yeah, that was the one I knew. Howard.
Another one is it Kentucky?
Yeah, Berea. is in.
Okay, since we have only half of it, we're going to send it to Asalh'S,
West Virginia.
West Virginia State.
West Virginia
Virginia.
Police Institute.
But it was West Virginia, yeah.
All right.
It was a different name though.
All right, so we'll give Aahgs half credit and we'll give Asalh'S half credit.
That works.
0.5.
In what year did Carter G. Woodson die? This goes to Asalh'S.
1950.
1950.
1950 is correct. This next question goes to Aahgs. Woodson's accomplishments are also remembered through the University of Virginia's Carter G. Woodson Institute for African American and African Studies, and the Dr. G. Carter Woodson African American Museum, located in what city and state?
I know.
Aahgs.
St. Petersburg, Florida.
You are correct. St. Petersburg, Florida. This next question, whoops, we're in part 2.
Oh, that's the hard part.
All right, part 2 is famous quotes. Who said, "We younger Negro artists who create now intend to express our individual dark-skinned selves without fear or shame. If white people are pleased, we are glad. If they are not, it doesn't matter. We know we are beautiful." Hint, he was part of the Harlem Renaissance. Asalh'S?
Langston Hughes?
That's what I said, Langston Hughes.
is correct.
Yeah.
This next question goes to, or quote goes to Aahgs. Those who have not learned to do for themselves and have to depend solely on others never obtain any more rights or privileges in the end than they had in the beginning.
Carter Woodson.
You are correct. Carter G. Woodson.
Yay.
This next question goes, or quote goes to Asalh'S. I am not concerned with your liking or disliking me. All I ask that you respect me as a human being. Asalh'S? Major League Baseball player, 1954.
Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson is correct.
Yeah, I like that line. I hadn't heard that.
Thanks for the hint.
Better write that one down.
Next question. We will kneel in. We will sit in until we can eat in any corner in the United States. We will walk until. We will take our children to any school in the United States, and we will lie in until every Negro in America can vote. Hint, this person recently passed, Aahgs.
John
Williams.
Who?
John Williams?
Yeah.
John Lewis.
Lewis, not Williams.
No, Asalh'S?
John Lewis.
John Lewis.
Asalh'S, do you have a response?
John Lewis.
John Lewis.
No.
D.T.
Daisy
Vivian.
Bates.
P.T. Vivian.
Daisy.
Daisy Lampkin. Say it again, Marlene, please.
Next question.
No,
Goes
what
to
was it?
Asalh'S.
Can we have the
Say
answer?
loud, I'm Black and I'm proud.
James Brown. Oh,
James Brown is correct. This next quote goes to Aahgs.
Okay.
What the people want is simple. They want an America as good as its promise. This was a U.S. Congresswoman, 1977.
Shirley Chisholm.
Shirley Chisholm.
Nope.
Barbara Gordon.
I mean,
they getting two
You get
answers.
one response. You only get one answer.
Oh,
So I heard
okay.
Shirley Chisholm, which was the incorrect response. So it goes to Asalh'S.
Barbara Jordan.
Barbara Jordan. Barbara C. Jordan is correct. Next question goes to Asalh'S. Politics, although not perfect, was the best available nonviolent means of changing how we live. Politics is not an end, it's a means to an end. Hint, Atlanta's first Black mayor in 1988.
Maynard Jackson.
Maynard Jackson is correct.
Yes.
Aahgs. We Black folk, our history and our present being are a mirror of all the manifold experiences of America. What we want, what we represent, what we endure is what America is. If we Black folk perish, America will perish. Hint, a native son.
Richard Wright.
Richard Wright is correct. This next quote goes to Asalh'S. The function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language, and so you spend 20 years proving that you do. None of that is necessary. One more thing. This is a well-known novelist, Asalh'S.
Oh, I know who it is.
Asalh'S. No response, Asalh'S? Okay, it goes
Toni
to
Morrison.
Toni Morrison is correct.
Thanks, Rev.
I believe this is the final question. Yes, this will be the final quote. I am America. Only I'm the part you won't recognize. But get used to me. Black, confident, cocky. My name, not yours. My religion, not yours. My goals, my own. Get used to me. Hint, Aahgs lit the Olympic torch in 1996.
Muhammad Ali?
Muhammad Ali is correct. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you. That was very fun, educational.
That was fun.
Can we go back a couple more? Because I didn't hear the answer to the one question.
What question was it?
Which one was it, Lorraine? We were talking at the same time.
I think it was
Never
Daisy
mind.
Base. Okay, we can get it later.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Now I will turn the program over to Alexis, who will tell us who won the debate, who won the challenge.
The score today was Asalh'S 13.5 and Aahgs 9.5.
Hey,
Asalh'S remains
next year.
next year.
I thank you all for your participation. I hope you enjoyed this part of the program. And now I will turn it over to Ronald Saunders, who will give us our closing remarks.
Wow. Wasn't that something? I know everybody had to enjoy that.
Mhm.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Is there a problem? I don't see myself in the video.
We see you.
Oh, okay. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge all of our participants with congratulations and thank yous today for this outstanding program. I mean, to sit back and just to listen to that deep, penetrating scholarship by Dr. Higginbotham and to watch Aahgs and Asalh'S engage in a contest for fun and joy and a broader context of learning is most important. I think everybody today would actually have to agree with that. Dr. Higginbotham, your presentation was moving and informative, which showed the deep personal relationship between your father and Dr. Woodson and the association founded by Dr. Woodson in 1915. You showed how these great Black men who were titans provided excellent role models for us all to emulate. It goes without question, Dr. Higginbotham, to understand how you and your personal life in the context of choosing your career were inspired by your father and mother, plus by the men and women around your environment, such as Dr. Woodson. Your father's deep ties to the association founded by Dr. Woodson are to be acknowledged, respected, given the historical landscape in which they live. We fully enjoy your personal presentation today and taking the time out from your hectic, demanding schedule to be with us in Pittsburgh today. And for that, we are most grateful. Furthermore, Dr. Higginbotham, you have done an outstanding job of elevating the profile of Asalh'S in the United States and internationally. I would like to thank the team members of Aahgs and the Mckenzie branch for competing in the Woodson Trivia Challenge, which was not only a lot of fun, but was educational, informative, and enlightening. Asalh'S, which is the oldest premier organization of its kind in the world, strictly devoted to the conservation and promotion and preservation of African American history and culture, welcomes all for membership. It is also membership renewal time, and we invite all to either send your fees to the Asalh'S National website or to Dr. Edna B. Mckenzie, Asalh'S, P.O. Box 17476, Pittsburgh, PA 15235. I'll repeat that. Asalh'S National website or Dr. Edna B. Mckenzie, Asalh'S, P.O. Box 17476, Pittsburgh, PA. African-American nonprofits in particular have been extremely hard hit by the loss of funds during the worst pandemic in United States history. And we fully appreciate your donations and gifts during this challenging period. A donation of any size is welcome to continue the deep legacy started by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the recognized father of Black history. We have a lot of dynamic, engaging programs planned for the new year. And we will start off with Alana Carter, our branch historian, who will give a presentation on January the 9th at 11 a.m. titled Along the Rappahannock and in Between, Exploring Virginia African-American Genealogy Resource. Asalh'S Black History theme for 2021 is the Black family. Throughout the month of February, Asalh'S will host festival virtual programming in observance and celebration of the strengths, struggles, resistance, and sheer perseverance of the Black family. I would like to give special thanks to my daughter, Tammy, today with assisting Marlene for hosting this invaluable program. I would also like to say Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, and have a joyous, prosperous, healthy New Year. Thank you. Take care. Peace. Thank you.